Hi, I'm Professor Steve Wroe, and welcome to another episode of Super Predators. And today we're going to look at what is probably the most famous and notorious fossil species of them all, Tyrannosaurus rex. Now, this big bad boy is pretty much your archetypal monster. You could hardly dream up anything scarier than this beast. T-Rex has one hell of a reputation, and we're here to see if he lives up to it. There's been a heck of a lot written about this big North American supervillain, and I couldn't begin to summarize it all in a short video. So here, based on the most recent science, we're going to really focus on how it hunted and killed its prey and how it compares to other giant theropods in these respects. Now, after providing just a bit of background info, we're going to look into the main strands of evidence that give us insight into the predatory behavior of this giant. We'll be paying particular attention to the mechanics of its gargantuan skull and trace evidence of predation in the fossil record. Regarding size, much has been said, but over the last 20 years or so, most studies based on reasonably complete skeletons appear to have converged on estimates of between around 6,500 and 7,500 kilograms for T-Rex. Although the largest here, nicknamed Scotty, has an estimated weight of nearly 8,900 kilos. This particular estimate, published in 2020, was based on a method derived earlier by a colleague of mine at the University of New England here in Armidale, Nicholas Campione. Shout out to you, Nick. This method is based on measurements taken from the upper leg bone or femur, and it's widely considered to provide more reliable estimates than those derived from skull measurements or other single bones. Incidentally, a new species of Tyrannosaurus was named just this year, Tyrannosaurus macraensis. Seems to be of comparable size to T-Rex. Who knows though, with just one specimen found, it may well be bigger. How does T-Rex stack up against other giant theropods? Here he is in blue, and as you can see, there are other contenders for biggest. But estimates for most of these are based on pretty incomplete material that doesn't include a femur. Among those that do, the largest is Giganotosaurus. Based on femur dimensions, Giganotosaurus weighs in at just under 6,300 kilo, which certainly puts it within the range of T-Rex. Of course, there are more reasonably complete known specimens of Tyrannosaurus than of Giganotosaurus or any of the other big theropods you can see in this figure. The discovery of more complete material for any of them may lead to weight estimates exceeding that of Scotty's. The wild card here is Spinosaurus. Estimates of its body mass vary wildly, some exceeding 20,000 kilos. But the most recent and most believable to me was published in 2022. These guys came up with an estimate of 7,400 kilo, certainly within the range of T-Rex, but not exceeding it. Anyway, T-Rex may or may not have been the biggest theropod ever, but everyone agrees on one thing. It had a truly massive skull. And the skull is where it's at if you want to begin to understand how it hunted and fed upon its prey. To me, everything about it screams big biter. Its teeth are massive and robust too, like other members of its family, but unlike the more delicate, more shark-like teeth of other big theropods like Giganotosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, and Spinosaurus. So let's dive in and take a look at the competition. Here are some 3D computer models. Unfortunately, I don't have one for Carcharodontosaurus, but it's within the same family as Giganotosaurus, and their skull and tooth shapes are pretty similar. So first, let's compare T-Rex to Giganotosaurus. Here we have Giganotosaurus on the left, and T-Rex on the right. Now, if we look at these inside view, there's not much between them in terms of the length of the skulls or the height. These aren't quite to scale. However, if we flip this Giganotosaurus round and look at it in top view, we can see that this is a very narrow skull. But when we flip the T-Rex skull into dorsal view, we can see that it is way thicker and way more robust. This contrast is just as obvious in the front view. And again, comparing T-Rex to Spinosaurus over here on the left, we see a very similar thing. The skull of T-Rex is just way more robust. Here in top view, the differences are even more obvious. And you can see the massive areas here in T-Rex for the insertion of muscles compared to Spinosaurus over here. The overall size and shape of the skull and teeth of T-Rex are obviously well adapted to sustain really high bite forces, but there are some more subtle adaptations in here as well. T-Rex is also characterized by fused nasal bones at the tip of its snout, and a 2020 study based on computer modeling by Costa et al. Found that its skull was far more rigid than previously thought. Both are adaptations to a big bite. So these are some of the observable differences. What do they mean in terms of measurable performance? Just how hard did T-Rex actually bite? A number of different approaches have been taken in attempts to determine this. These include reverse engineering based on tooth indentations on bone, the use of beam theory, essentially modeling the skull as a simple two-dimensional lever system. I discussed this in some more detail in another recent video here. And computer modeling based on 3D scan data. These have produced an extraordinary range of results from around 13,400 newtons to a whopping great 301,000 newtons, pretty much the equivalent of 30 metric tons. The lower number here was derived from reverse engineering on damaged bone, and although it's very interesting, there's no telling whether this was the result of an animal exerting maximum bite force. A maximum bite force is, of course, what we're looking for here. The higher number relied on scaling bite forces up from extant taxa that were way smaller than T-Rex, and frankly, this is not a terribly reliable method. Predictions based on beam theory and 3D computer modeling have fallen within a far more tightly constrained range. I've used both these approaches myself on a pretty wide range of species. Using 3D approaches, Bates and Falkingham 2012 came up with a predicted maximum of around 45,000 newtons. Gignac and Erickson 2017, using a model of the same T-Rex and a pretty similar approach, came up with a maximum closer to 36,000 newtons. The difference was probably due to differences in the way that the jaw closing muscles were reconstructed, and we'll need more data from living carnivorous reptiles to get a tighter fix on this. But even if we accept 36,000 newtons as a maximum, that's still a heck of a lot of newtons, and way above anything taken or predicted for any living species. It's double the 18,000 newtons or so that I predicted for the largest white shark some years back. The most recent T-Rex bite force estimate was provided by Manabu Sakamoto in 2022. Sakamoto applied a pretty sophisticated approach that used 2D beam theory informed by data on the relationships between dinosaurs. His prediction, around 48,000 newtons, pretty darn close to Bates and Falkingham's 45,000 newtons. Sakamoto's study is useful in another respect, because he calculated bite forces for a wide range of theropods. We can make comparisons between species that are based on the same approach. From these results, we can see that T-Rex is clearly in a league of its own. With a maximum of 48,000 newtons, this big biter smashes the closest contender, Carcharodontosaurus, at 25,500 newtons, and Spinosaurus limps over the line at under 12,000 newtons. Sakamoto doesn't give a prediction for Giganotosaurus, but remember, it's of similar size and closely related to Carcharodontosaurus. The skull of Giganotosaurus is a bit more robust, so we might expect a slightly higher figure here, but there can be no doubt that it would have been well below that of T-Rex. So what the heck was T-Rex doing with all that bite force? Before we answer that, we need to consider just a couple of other tools that the big guy had in his kit. Endocasts of its brain reveal that it likely had an excellent sense of smell, maybe twice as effective as that of the turkey vulture, which has the most acute sense of smell among birds. It had excellent vision, probably comparable to that of modern-day birds of prey, and it had pretty darn good hearing to boot. In terms of athleticism, most estimates of maximum speed put T-Rex at around 12 kilometers per hour, a very fast jog for a human, and it could pretty likely sustain these speeds for protracted periods. And here, in this pretty recent work, Eric Snively and friends in 2019 suggest that T. rex was way more nimble on its feet than allosaurids like Giganotosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus. So, not only could it effectively hit hard with a bone-cracking bite, it could float like a 7-ton butterfly, kind of a theropod cross between Mike Tyson and Muhammad Ali. It seems the tyrant lizard king had it all. So again, what was it doing with it? And to whom was it doing it to? Well, for a decade or two, debate raged over whether T. rex was a scavenger or an active predator. Thankfully, this is over. Everyone now agrees that T. rex was a predator that scavenged when the opportunity arose, just like every other predator known to mankind. This was always just a dumbass debate to me. That said, as far as direct evidence goes, T. rex tooth marks have certainly been left in the bones of quite a few specimens, which could be the result of scavenging or predation. The first strong evidence of active predation was damage to the tail of an adult hadrosaur, published by Ken Carpenter in 1998. Because there was clear evidence of healing, the animal had clearly survived the attack and must have been alive at the time. But there was still some question as to whether the attacker was a T. rex or perhaps a large crocodilian. Conclusive evidence was forthcoming in 2013, published in this paper by De Palma and others. They found part of a fractured T. rex tooth embedded in the healed vertebra of another hadrosaur. So we can be pretty darn sure that T. rex hunted hadrosaurs. These were big beasts that grew to around 5,500 kilo. What about Triceratops though? It has been suggested that it was far and away the most common large herbivore in Western North America at the time. There is pretty compelling evidence that T. rex did target this formidable plant eater. In this 2008 book, John Happ describes a horn of a Triceratops that has been gnawn by a large predator, but has also at least partially healed. Certainly to me, it seems really unlikely that the apex predator of Western North America wasn't regularly targeting the most abundant large herbivore available to it. But both the hadrosaur and Triceratops were on average a little smaller than your average T. rex, and although it's possible that T. rex might have occasionally targeted larger sauropods, they definitely weren't common. So to me, an obvious question is why the heck did it need such a crazy powerful bite? Gignac and Erickson here in 2017 suggest that T. rex's massive bite was needed to process bone, although they weren't arguing for a strictly scavenging lifestyle. And certainly they present strong evidence that T. rex did ingest relatively large amounts of bone, based on tooth marks, heavily worn teeth, and fossilized likely T. rex crap. Personally, I think that this in itself is at best only a partial explanation. I think that the rest comes down to the specifics of how and whom it preyed upon. No hadrosaur could have faced up to an adult T. rex, but the same cannot be said for Triceratops. Whilst the best option for a hadrosaur was clearly flight, the morphology of the massively built three-horned Triceratops suggests that it was well adapted to stand and fight. I reckon that 3,600 newtons or more of bite force is major overkill for a T. rex just to specialise in predation on a smaller, poorly defended animal like a hadrosaur, whose only defence was to run. And as I showed in my previous video on the hyena, you don't really need super high bite forces to process bone. And although T. rex may have preferentially gone for subadult or injured individuals, as do most predators, I think that the main reason it needed such overwhelming bite force was because it was necessary to take down heavily armoured Triceratops, and that Triceratops were commonly preyed upon. And while the evidence suggests that T. rex ran down hadrosaurs attacking from behind, firstly biting the animal's tail and flanks before bringing it down, it may well have had to go head to head with Triceratops, at least on occasion. One way or another, it had to wrestle with the three-horned beast, and all it had to wrestle with were its massive skull and teeth. Most likely, it had to find a way to get through or under that bony frill in order to deliver a killing bite to the neck. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that the horns and bony frill of Triceratops evolved solely as a defense against Tyrannosaurus rex. They almost certainly played a role in intraspecies competition, Triceratops on Triceratops, as do the varied horns of many living herbivores today. But most horned herbivores that we know of will use them in defense against predators, often effectively and sometimes inflicting mortal damage on their assailant. We'll have to wait for future fossil discoveries to answer this question. The most tantalizing at present are the dueling dinosaurs recovered from Montana, now being processed in the Carolina Museum of Natural History. Here the remains of a subadult T-Rex are entangled with those of a Triceratops within a single block of sandstone. Both appear to have sustained potentially fatal injuries. Whether their deaths were the result of mortal combat between the two has yet to be determined. Paleontologists all around the world are dying to find out. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. In recent decades, there have been other contenders, but in my opinion, T-Rex remains the tyrant lizard king. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, then please hit the like and subscribe buttons. And please feel free to tell me what you think in the comments section below. I'll upload another episode next week. This one will be a surprise.